Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are. This is Bull Like a Leopard. As always, please like and share, and also subscribe if you want to hear more coverage of current events. There is this issue that is cropping up, which is how strong is the Trump wall against impeachment? Meaning, how many people who are Republican or conservative leaning willing to, stake their career on the survival of the Trump presidency? And you can see all the time people cropping out and saying, well, if they don't ditch him, Trump will be the end of the Republican Party. No, I can explain this in pretty simple terms. If the Republican Party is complicit in the impeachment and then removal from office of Donald Trump, they will effectively cede their place in the political system as a governing party for probably 20 to 30 years if they recover at all. It could be that the party itself will implode and we'll see something like has happened in other countries like Canada, where conservative parties have just, I would say, burst into flames and been succeeded by other ones simply because people are tired of the establishment bullshit that goes on at the top. Now, there is some crap going on among the populists. Okay, let's not play favorites here. Steve Bannon, I think he has a lot of interesting insights. I wouldn't say he's the greatest political prophet, but he certainly is someone worth listening to sometimes. He says Trump may be impeached in 6 weeks and face a challenge from Bloomberg and Clinton. But hold on a second. Think about that timeline. 6 weeks from now, this is the end of October. That would place it in December. So people are thinking that it's possible Donald Trump could be impeached by, the Christmas holiday before that. I think that would be a very interesting thing to happen. I do believe that the Clinton impeachment happened around the same time of the year, but that also happened in a non-election year, which is a little important, or not going into an election year. It happened in 1999, I believe, and Clinton was a lame duck president, so it wouldn't have really affected the next term or the next election. Simply the next person to win the Democratic nomination would have run anyway, and it wouldn't have affected that. In this case, we're talking about a president who is running for re-election. We're talking about a president who within a year, if this is true, if Nancy Pelosi decides to impeach Trump by the end of the year, people will start to ask, why are you holding this impeachment during a year when you could simply vote him out of office? If you think that he's such an awful president, then why are you trying to have him removed by impeachment? Just vote him out. Because the fact is that there have been many, many rumblings that the Democrats do not believe that they could defeat Donald Trump without impeaching him. And in this article, I read this earlier, Steve Bannon went through a lot of, musings that he has had, mainly about people like Mick Mulvaney not being able to articulate a real defense for Donald Trump. I'm a little mixed on this. I don't think that Mick Mulvaney said anything wrong based on what I've heard. I really believe that this notion, the whole thing is about perception defining reality. And the fact is that the media, no matter what Mulvaney would have said, would twist his words and make it seem like he was admitting to a quid pro quo in the Ukraine case, when in reality, there's only one way to know whether either there was a quid pro quo in the legal sense or there was not. That is really the true ruling here. Unfortunately, impeachment is not a legal procedure. It is a political procedure. The House impeaches the president, and then the Senate puts him up on trial, and Donald Trump would have to be removed by 2/3 of the Senate. I have my doubts that you could get 2/3 of the Senate to vote for impeaching Donald Trump. And if they fall short, let's say that you only have 62 senators. Yeah, let's say some of these, some of these capsizing Republicans, people like, let's say, Romney or even Susan Collins. Susan Collins isn't as bad as people make her out to be, but, it's conceivable that she could vote for impeachment. Let's say that you have about 11 Republicans who vote for impeachment, or 13 Republicans, something like that, and they fall short. All Donald Trump has to do is say, look, I am being targeted by the entire political class. The Democratic establishment, the Republican establishment, they unite as one when they are threatened with someone who can deliver real results for American citizens as opposed to results for corporations and special interests. So, yeah, I think that Steve Bannon is exaggerating. And in fact, there seems to be evidence that Nancy Pelosi is in no hurry to pass the impeachment process over to the Senate. Apparently, Mitch McConnell had floated the idea of holding a Senate impeachment trial after Thanksgiving. So in the Post article, this is from Vox, by the way, but in the Post article, Bannon had made it out to be that it was Mitch McConnell who would be the person who would probably stick the knife in Donald Trump's back. And look, I think that I've had my share of criticisms for Mitch McConnell for many, many years. You can recall that during the whole debacle over the healthcare and everything, that I was saying, he's bitch McConnell. He doesn't have the balls to, push through a full repeal of Obamacare and everything. However, I think that Mitch McConnell would not take the risk of removing Trump and therefore jeopardizing a Senate majority in 2020. That's really all. Mitch McConnell, the only thing he cares about is having the GOP stay in control of the Senate, and he's probably going to be running for re-election in 2020, which will be a difficult re-election battle, and it will be more difficult if Mitch McConnell stabs Donald Trump in the back and all the Trump MAGA people in Kentucky basically say, screw you, we're not even going to vote for you. They could even primary him and vote him out. So, no, I don't think that Mitch McConnell will risk any of his own political fortunes in order to remove Donald Trump. The only way that can make sense, and this is something that people don't understand, is if the Republican establishment decides, look, we're going to get rid of him, Donald Trump, and then go to the voters and say, look at you, who else do you have? No one else can possibly challenge the Democrats. Either you vote for us or you'll be, it's the classic triangulation technique where you do everything that your enemy is talking about, but you portray them as the worst person, which both parties do all the time. It's the Dick Morris method. Always do things that poll well. Always do things that supposedly get you to to that sweet spot where you can win elections. And unfortunately, for most politicians, that's not going to work as well as it used to. I think Donald Trump has changed a few things in politics, and one of them is that you don't necessarily believe the polls and you don't believe the media. And I think that Mitch McConnell, however of a flawed person he might be, however I do hold it against him what he did with Obamacare and didn't go and stick the knife in and say, hey, you're all going to vote for repeal or you can go screw yourselves. I think he should have done it, and I think it'll be a blight on his record. But the fact is that Nancy Pelosi is saying that it's possible that the impeachment hearings will take longer. It says Senate Republicans believe an impeachment trial in their chamber will wrap up by the end of the year, but House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is not making any promises on her end. I have no idea. Pelosi flatly told reporters at her weekly press conference Thursday, the timeline will depend on the truth line, and that's what we're looking for. So this is a very bad I guess, strategy for people who believe that impeachment is a sure thing. People who believe that Donald Trump is guilty. Okay, you can believe somebody is guilty. That's fine. That doesn't make them guilty, but it's still fine to believe that someone's guilty. They will be looking at this and saying, why drag this out? Why not just impeach him and make the case in the Senate? There does have to be a House hearing and a lot of stuff related to that and presenting their case in the House. And then the Republicans and Democrats get to vote on it in the House, and Justin Amash too, who's an independent. But once that is over, they will say, well, now we get to do the big dance in the Senate. That will be the case of a lot of these people who are saying, well, as long as we impeach Trump, the public opinion polls will follow in tow. Nancy Pelosi is suggesting that that's not really the case, but the impeachment fans are not understanding that. They think it's so obvious, and they're so oblivious to the fact that the standard of evidence is so low in this case, or the evidence that it's available is so low compared to the standard needed. They're so oblivious to the fact that in many states, impeachment would probably lead to massive losses for the Democrats, especially in southern and rural states. I would say in states like Michigan, it's not a good idea. In states like Wisconsin and Minnesota, it's also not the greatest idea at this time. I think that there are people who would be willing to vote for a Democrat in Congress who, if that Democrat voted for impeachment, they might decide, look, we sent you to Washington to do something for us. And instead, all you're doing is you're holding these hearings in order to avoid a real election next year. And that's really the problem that Nancy Pelosi is going to create. If you have these impeachment inquiries or hearings and then the trial and the vote drag into 2020, it is going to overshadow the Democratic primary. It is, and this is something that Steve Bannon discussed as well, what's going to happen with the Democrats. It's going to suck the life out of many of these campaigns. And in especially the campaigns of people who are members of the Senate, people who are currently serving in the Senate. Those would be Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. I believe there's a couple other senators who are running who don't even matter. It would be a tremendous political mistake for this trial to be dragged into 2020 and then have some of these candidates essentially sidelined for weeks on end while the Senate deliberates over the evidence. And then if it comes back and they don't vote to remove Trump, then that's just a lot of time wasted over nothing, except for this symbolic statement that Donald Trump was the first president to be officially impeached in his first term, except maybe Andrew Johnson was. I think Johnson was a one-term president, and he was impeached. And really, what's the reason that GOP people would probably not decide to vote for impeachment in the Senate? The reason is judicial appointment. Donald Trump has been the person who is basically validating all of the he's gone and done a complete 180 on the Never Trumper delusions over how awful it would be with a Donald Trump presidency. The entire judiciary has been remade. You have a lot of these people who were once Obama. The Ninth Circuit has been virtually flipped. It's been all. I think that there's a couple more.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said on Wednesday the Senate will.
There's been a couple, I guess, instances where you have just these circuits, like the Ninth Circuit and I believe the Fourth Circuit were flipped under Donald Trump, or they're close to flipping. And it doesn't matter. This is what's really important to understand. The federal judiciary is almost like the chain link fence around the government, okay? It prevents really the popular vote from getting, running amok and I guess imposing everything by, the will of the people every single day. And some people would say that's very negative. I acknowledge that it sounds very anti-democratic, and I think that there's a perspective that says that the courts should be less powerful. And yes, there is a case to be made that the courts should have less of an effect on the public discourse and laws and what's going on in the country and how various decisions are made. Some people say, oh, gay marriage shouldn't be discussed. These Christians especially, they say gay marriage shouldn't have been imposed by the judiciary. I agree. There's also some people that say, for instance, that the federal judiciary should not be in charge of validating that all of these corporations are able to give money to political campaigns virtually unlimited through the super PACs, through Citizens United. So those are good and legitimate cases to be made. However, during Democratic administrations, especially under Presidents Clinton and Obama, Jimmy Carter wasn't as prolific, but especially under them, and then prior to that, President Johnson and President Kennedy, there was this wave of appointing activist judges. And the activist judges have gotten us to the place where we've been for the past 60 to 70 years. Roosevelt, I forgot, he appointed 9 Supreme Court judges. If you think about that, he was able to run through the entire roster and pick the whole thing. He was basically, the president who reshaped the judiciary in one fell swoop. That is something to behold, and therefore, what Donald Trump is doing is something that the Republicans would not want to give up. He's basically redoing the federal judiciary from the bottom up, as opposed to from the top to the bottom. He's saying, look, there's all of these vacancies. We're going to do whatever we can to put in people who believe in strict constructionism, what they call originalist judges, people who read into the Constitution what they believe is the founders' original meaning. I know that there's a lot of conjecture about that. I don't believe in this whole Scalia worship or anything like that. And I'm not a legal expert anyway. But you do have to wonder which is the lesser of the two evils. People who believe, that the Constitution should be interpreted the same way as it was back in 1789 and thereabouts when it was first being formulated, or I think it was eventually ratified by all the states in 1793. But in any case, should it be those people? Are those the worst people? Or is it the people who think, well, now I'm on the bench and I think that we should use a lot of very abstract legal theory in order to really reshape what the people who originally wrote the Constitution said, because they really don't understand how we would be living today. I think that the second option is worse. And I think that a lot of the Republican Party, even people I don't like, even people like Lindsey Graham that I really, really don't like, people like Mitch McConnell that I kind of want to wear gloves whenever I see, a newspaper with his picture on it and pick it up. Even them, I think they have the recognizance to say, look, we need to impose in this country the most hands-off reality. The courts cannot be running around and just declaring that reality is whatever they see it as. So, yes, they are going to probably support the acquittal of Donald Trump simply for the selfish and narrow reason that they want the federal judiciary to remain, a strict constructionist realm. They want these federal judgeships to go to people who will not try to legislate from the bench. And I think it's probably the only good thing you can say about the GOP. There's a lot of awful things that the GOP does. The GOP was complicit in the abuses of the Bush administration, the Patriot Act, things like the war in Iraq, the bailouts. The GOP was very complicit in that. But they know that if they were to kick Donald Trump out and put Mike Pence in or become these wet noodles and just let the Democrats walk all over them, there is not going to be another Trump-like figure at the head of that party for the next 20 to 30 years, possibly never. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to have someone who really comes in and fights like a pit bull. And most of the Republicans are just complete jokes. If you look at Marco Rubio, what the hell does the man stand for? He stands for defense contractors. He stands for committing troops overseas. He stands for intervention in Latin America. He is not going to be a person who makes it his keystone accomplishment to reshape the federal judiciary, which is a noble pursuit, in my opinion. He's not going to be a person who really goes to the mat for other issues like removing this tyrannical Department of Education and its Common Core. Things like that have been virtually used as just bloody shirts by the Republican Party in order to pretend that they're different from the Democrats, when in reality they're not very much different. Thanks to the Trump administration, we might eventually get one party that does represent a limited government perspective, one that defends personal liberty, one that avoids entangling the U.S. in foreign conflict. I think that Donald Trump has, on the whole, been a more positive influence on this party than any president probably for the last 100 years, right? The Republican Party has been tainted almost irreversibly since the 50s by the military-industrial complex and things like that. Maybe something will change, maybe not, but that's it. Please put your comments in the, below, either on BitChute or on YouTube. I want to hear your opinions on what you think will happen with this impeachment inquiry, whether you think the Republican Party will decide to ditch the Trumpster or whether they will, I guess, do the right thing and try to hold on for the better cause of trying to change the way this country is run. After all, I do believe that he is innocent. I'm one of these people who does believe in the presumption of innocence. I don't think that hearsay is something that can be used conclusively to declare someone guilty, as the Democrats do. That's essentially what they're doing. So just let me know what you think either way. Also, please like, share, and subscribe. Also, subscribe to me on BitChute and on Minds, as well as on Subscribestar if you want to donate. You can also find me on Gab at Starscream85, everywhere else at Chef Leopard, and I'll talk to you later.